Hello, listener. You're here now, and that means it's time to rest. Tonight's story is meant to be heard in the dark, with rain or fire sounds as your only light. If you're still awake, leave a comment. What time is it where you are? And are you listening alone? Subscribe and click the notification bell to return for more stories in the dark. Story 1. What the Cabin Inherited from Me. I'm writing this from a place where the walls whisper back, and I need you to understand that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. My name is Ava. 2 months ago, my grandfather died and left me the old family cabin in the remote Adirondacks. The lawyer's letter called it a quiet retreat, a place to heal after a brutal year of personal losses. It felt like a sign. I packed my car with art supplies, my dog, a nervous terrier named Banjo, and a desperate need for solitude. The cabin, Whispering Pines, was exactly as I remembered from childhood summers. A sturdy, 2-room log structure nestled in a dense embrace of pine and spruce, a quarter-mile from the nearest neighbor, and a solid 20 from the town of Cold Brook. The air smelled of damp earth and pine resin, a scent id always associated with safety. But the memories were gauzy, seeing through a child's eyes. Now, as an adult, I noticed the details. The way the ancient, gnarled oak tree in the front yard seemed to lean away from the house, as if repelled. The fact that no birds sang within 50 feet of the property line. The silence there absolute and heavy. And the lock on the root cellar door, a heavy, rusted padlock that looked newer than anything else on the property. The first week was bliss. I painted, I hiked with Banjo. I slept deeply in the absolute dark and quiet. The unease was a subtle undercurrent, easy to ignore. It started with small things. My paints would be rearranged on the porch table. A favorite mug would migrate from the kitchen sink to the fireplace mantle. I chalked it up to grief brain, to being in a new space. Banjo, however, was a better barometer. He'd defreeze in the middle of a room, ears pricked, staring at a blank corner of the log wall, a low whine building in his throat. Then he'd shake it off and curl at my feet. But here's a question for you, watching this right now. What's the weirdest thing you've ever found in a place you thought you knew? A hidden compartment, a strange marking, something that just didn't belong. Leave it in the comments, because I am starting to think these little discoveries are warnings we're supposed to heed. The escalation was a slow, logical creep. One night, I heard scratching. Not the skittering of mice in the walls, but a deliberate, rhythmic scrape, scrape, scrape from the root cellar door. I grabbed a flashlight, heart hammering, and shone it at the door. The sound stopped instantly. I saw nothing but the old padlock gleaming dully. The next day, I found Banjo's favorite toy, a stuffed squirrel, carefully placed on the top step of the cellar, sitting upright as if on display. My blood went cold. That's when I noticed the smell. It wasn't rot, not exactly. It was the smell of wet stone, of cold soil, and underneath it, a faint, coppery tang like old pennies. It would waft through the cabin, strongest near the cellar door, then vanish. I called my mother. "Mom, did Grandpa ever use the root cellar for anything weird?" A long pause. "He called it the cold room. For preserves. Why? No reason, just curious." Another pause, heavier. "Ava, that place it got to him in the end. He said the pines whispered things. We thought it was the dementia. Just be careful, okay?" Her words should have sent me packing. Instead, they rooted me there. This was my inheritance, my fresh start. I couldn't be chased out by creaks and smells. I decided to confront it. I bought a new, heavier padlock, telling myself I was securing the place. As I removed the old lock, it felt ice cold despite the afternoon sun. The hasp squealed in protest as I swung the cellar door open. A rush of that cold, mineral-smelling air billowed up. The stairs descended into absolute blackness. My flashlight beam cut a shaky path down crude stone steps to a packed dirt floor. The room was empty. Totally, utterly empty. No shelves, no jars, not even a cobweb. Just smooth, hard-packed earth. Relief, warm and dizzying, flooded me. It was just a hole in the ground. My imagination, fueled by isolation and grief, had built a horror story on a foundation of nothing. For 3 days, I lived in that false safety. The smells vanished. The noises stopped. Banjo relaxed. I painted a beautiful landscape of the lake, my first truly happy piece in years. I even laughed at myself. It had been so scared of a dusty old cellar. The 4th night, the storm hit. A proper mountain tempest that shook the cabin and plunged us into a blackout. I lit candles, their light dancing frantic shadows on the logs. Banjo trembled in my lap. And then, under the roar of wind and rain, I heard it. A new sound. Not a scratch, but a voice. It was faint, muffled, as if speaking through layers of wool and earth. It wasn't words, not at first. It was a cadence, a rhythm that mimicked human speech, but was utterly alien. It was coming from the root cellar door. My breath froze. The voice grew clearer, rising in volume. It was repeating something. It was repeating my words. Phrases I'd spoken alone in the cabin. Just a little longer, Banjo. I think the cobalt blew here. I miss you, Grandpa. It was parroting my life back to me in a flat, hollow tone that held no warmth. Only a terrible, focused attention. Then, the knob on the root cellar door began to turn. Slowly, deliberately. The new padlock I'd installed rattled against the hasp. Something was on the other side, trying the handle. Banjo shot from my lap, barking hysterically at the door, the fur on his spine rigid. The voice stopped. The knob stopped. In the sudden silence, broken only by the storm and Banjo's barks, a new sound emerged. A soft, wet, pattering sound from the other side of the door, like bare feet on damp earth. I couldn't move. I was a statue of terror. The door trembled as weight was thrown against it from the other side. Thump. A pause. Thump. The iron hasp groaned. The voice returned, but it had changed. was no longer mimicking. It was speaking in my grandfather's voice, not the frail, dementia-riddled voice of his end, but the strong, warm baritone of my childhood. Ava honey, it called, so lovingly it cracked my heart. The lock stuck. Let me in. It's so cold down here. Tears streamed down my face. It was him. It sounded exactly like him. A desperate, grieving part of me lurched forward. My hand actually reached for the lock. Banjo, in a frenzy, nipped at my ankle, the sharp pain jolting me back. And in that moment of clarity, I heard it under the perfect imitation. A faint, wet, clicking sound, like stones being knocked together in a throat. No, I whispered. The thing on the other side heard me. The loving grandfather's voice vanished, replaced by a sibilant, multi-layered hiss of pure fury. The door exploded inward in a shower of splintered wood and twisted metal. My candlelight guttered and died. In the flash of lightning that followed, I saw it. It had the rough shape of a man, but it was built of the dark, packed earth of the cellar floor, studded with small, smooth stones where its eyes should be. Its mouth was a dark, wet rift. It didn't move, it poured forward, shedding clumps of soil. The smell of wet stone and copper now overwhelming. I ran. I snatched up Banjo and fled out the front door into the lashing rain and howling wind, wearing nothing but my pajamas. I didn't look back. I drove through the storm on sheer adrenaline, my white-knuckled grip on the wheel, the only thing tethering me to reality. I never went back. I sold the cabin for a pittance to a developer who didn't care about local whispers. I moved to a bright, noisy city apartment. Banjo sleeps curled against me every night. The doctors call it PTSD, and maybe it is. But they don't feel what I feel. They don't understand that the thing in the cellar wasn't just in the cabin. The cabin was built for it, to hold it. My grandfather wasn't its victim. He was its caretaker. And by leaving, by abandoning my post, I didn't escape. I just left the door open. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of something lurking just out of sight, then you understand why I had to share it. If you want to hear more tales from the edge of the unknown, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And let me know in the comments what's the weirdest thing you've ever found. Story 2. What the basement light was for. I'm writing this from a motel 3 towns over, and I know I can't go back, but I think it might already be too late. It all started with my grandmother's house. Her name was Alina, and she was a stern, quiet woman who lived alone in a big, old Victorian on the edge of town. When she passed, the will was simple. The house went to me, her only grandchild, Rachel. Everyone said I was lucky. It was a beautiful property, fully paid off. A fresh start. But they didn't know about the rule. The one rule shed drilled into me since I was a little girl visiting for summer holidays. Rachel, the light in the basement stairwell must never, ever be turned off. Not for a second. Do you understand? As a kid, Id nodded wide-eyed, imagining monsters under the stairs. As an adult inheriting the place, I saw it as a quirk, an old woman's eccentricity. Probably just a wiring issue she was superstitious about. The first week moving in was a blur of boxes and dust motes dancing in the slanted afternoon light. The house was exactly as I remembered. All dark wood, heavy drapes, and the faint, permanent scent of lemon polish. And something else, something dry, like old paper and forgotten corners. Id found the basement door on the first day, a heavy, painted-shut looking thing in the kitchen pantry. A single, old-fashioned pull-chain bulb hung in the small stairwell beyond, casting a weak, yellow glow onto the steep steps descending into utter blackness. Id tugged the chain. On, off, on. It worked fine. I left it on, a small tribute to Gran, but thought nothing more of it. My focus was on the main living spaces, but the house had its own rhythms. At precisely 3:17 a.m. every night, Id waked to the sound of the old plumbing groaning, a deep, guttural shudder that ran through the pipes in the walls. The floorboards in the hallway outside my bedroom would creak, a slow, deliberate sequence of 3 steps. Creak, 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 then silence. I chalked it up to an old house settling. Then there was the cold spot, right in the middle of the upstairs landing, a pocket of air so frigid it made your breath fog, even in late summer. And the flies. Not many, just 1 or 2, always dead and dry, appearing on windowsills. I'd sweep them away, and new ones would be there the next morning. It was unsettling, but still in the realm of quirky old house. I even joked about it on a video call with my friend Marcus. "It's got character," I said, forcing a smile. "Hey, before we go further, I've got to ask you guys something, because it's been on my mind ever since. What's the one weird rule or superstition your family had growing up? Something that seemed totally normal to you, but would freak anyone else out? Put it in the comments. I am genuinely curious." The escalation began on a Thursday. A storm was rolling in, and the wind was howling like a wounded animal around the eaves. I was reading in the living room when the power flickered once, twice, and then died completely, plunging the house into a deep, velvety blackness. Silence, thick and heavy, followed. Then I heard it. A new sound from the direction of the kitchen. Soft, rhythmic scratching. Not like a mouse. Slower, deliberate. Like something dragging a fingernail along the inside of the basement door. My blood turned to ice. Gran's rule screamed in my head. The light must never be turned off. The basement light was out. I sat frozen in the dark, listening to that awful, persistent scrape. After what felt like hours, the power surged back. The lights came on, the fridge hummed to life, and the scratching stopped instantly. I ran to the kitchen. The basement door was closed. The light in the stairwell was back on, glowing weakly. I told myself it was a tree branch, the wind, my imagination. I almost believed it. That false safety lasted 2 days. I decided to be proactive. I bought a pack of the strongest LED light bulbs I could find and a battery-powered emergency light. I was going to fix Gran's superstition. I opened the basement door. The smell of damp earth and that underlying dry paper sent wafting up. I reached in, unscrewed the old yellow bulb, and replaced it with a blinding white LED. The stairwell was now brightly, clinically lit. I placed the emergency light on the top step, switched it on. It cast a weird, double shadow down the stairs. Satisfied, I closed the door. That night, there was no scratching. Instead, there was a knock. 3 solid, polite raps on the basement door. My breath hitched. Then, a voice. It was faint, muffled by the wood, but horrifyingly clear. It was my Gran's voice, but wrong-strained and watery. Rachel, the light is too bright. It's rude. Turn it back. I spent the night barricaded in my bedroom with a chair under the doorknob. In the cold light of morning, logic fought back. Stress, grief, and overactive imagination. The house was playing tricks. I needed to confront it. I marched to the basement door, my heart a drum in my chest. I opened it. The stairwell light was off. The emergency light was dead. And on the top step, neatly placed, was one of Gran's favorite porcelain teacups. It was shattered, but the pieces were arranged, not as if dropped, but as if carefully laid out in a specific, circular pattern. A pattern that looked like a spiral. That's when I noticed the walls. The walls of the stairwell, which Id always assumed were painted a dark gray, weren't painted at all. The faint, vertical lines Id taken for wood grain they were writing. Tiny, cramped, handwritten lines, covering every inch from top to bottom, written in what looked like pencil or charcoal. I leaned closer, my nausea rising. The same phrase, repeated thousands upon thousands of times, in different handwritings, some elegant, some childish, some frantic and shaky. The light must stay on. The light must stay on. The light must stay on. At the very bottom of the stairwell, just before the darkness of the basement proper began, the writing changed. A single line in my grandmother's unmistakable, precise script. "I'm so sorry, Rachel." I tried to keep it fed. A soft, wet sigh echoed from the darkness below. It was the sound of something shifting, uncurling, and beginning to climb. The steps didn't creak under its weight. They made a different sound, a sticky, peeling sound, like tape being slowly pulled from skin. I stumbled back, slammed the door, and fumbled for the old yellow bulb. My hands shook so violently I dropped it, the glass shattering on the floor. The peeling, shuffling sound was at the door now. I could see the handle trembling. I did the only thing I could think of. I found a box of Christmas lights in the hall closet, the big, old-fashioned, multicolored ones. I plugged them in, and as the doorknob began to turn, I threw the entire tangled strand into the dark stairwell. A cascade of weak, colorful light. The turning stopped. The sticky sound receded, moving back down the stairs. I didn't wait. I ran. I got in my car and I drove. The image of that spiral of broken china burned into my mind. I am in this motel now. The cheap fluorescent light is humming. But last night, at 3:17 a.m., the power in the whole block flickered, just for a second. And when the light came back, there was a dead fly on my windowsill, and the faint, dry scent of old paper in the air. I think it followed the light, and I think I'm running out of bulbs. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you're my kind of people. Please help this channel grow by hitting that like button and subscribing for more weekly tales of terror. Your support is what keeps the lights on, literally, in some cases. Let me know in the comments what you think was in that basement. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. Stay safe out there. Story 3. The last message from cabin 7. I should have deleted the message the moment I saw it wasn't for me. My name is Ava, and I am a digital archivist, which is a fancy way of saying I organize other people's forgotten memories for a living. So when the opportunity came to spend a month at a remote, off-grid airbase in the Pacific Northwest to finish a big project, I jumped at it. Pinecrest Retreat was a cluster of 6 tiny, identical A-frame cabins nestled in a dense, silent forest, miles from the nearest town. It was perfect. Cabin 4 was mine. The key was under a mossy knoll. The Wi-Fi was surprisingly strong, and the only sounds were the wind in the towering pines and the distant rush of a river. It was exactly the isolation I needed, except for 2 things I noted, then dismissed. The guest book in my cabin only had entries up to cabin 6, and the door to cabin 7, at the very end of the winding path, was painted a stark, fresh black, unlike the rustic brown of the others. The first 3 days were blissfully productive. I'd work, take walks, and breathe air so clean it felt like a new kind of medicine. On the 4th evening, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a direct message through the Airbnb app from the host, a man named Carl. The message read, "Glad you're settling in. Remember, the rules are for your safety. Do not, under any circumstances, acknowledge the knocking from cabin 7 after dark. It's just the old pipes. Enjoy your stay." I stared at the screen. It felt oddly formal and slightly off. I'd read the house rules thoroughly. There was nothing about knocking pipes. I typed back a simple thanks will do, but the message failed to send. No service. I shrugged, blaming the spotty connection, and went back to work. The knocking started at 3:17 a.m. I know because the sound jolted me awake, and I fumbled for my phone, the blue light searing my eyes. It wasn't aggressive. It was polite, patient. 3 slow, evenly spaced taps. Tap, tap, tap. It came from the wall I shared with the next cabin. But cabin 5 was empty. The sound seemed to seep through the logs. I lay frozen, my heart a frantic bird in my chest. Carl's message flashed in my mind. It's just the old pipes. I repeated it like a mantra. The knocking didn't come again. I spent the rest of the night with every light on, my back against the headboard, listening to the oppressive silence that followed. Morning brought shaky relief. The forest was dappled with gentle sunlight, birds were chirping, and the knocking felt like a bad dream. I decided to call Carl from the landline in the main lodge, a small communal building. The phone rang and rang before a voicemail clicked on. A generic robotic voice stating the mailbox was full. As I hung up, I noticed the guest book on the front desk. Curiosity overriding my unease, I flipped it open. The entries were cheerful, mundane. Great hiking. Saw a bear. So peaceful. But as I neared the end, the entries changed. The last one, under cabin 6, read, heard the knocking. Didn't answer. Leaving a day early. The date was from 8 months ago. Every page after that was blank. The book hadn't been used in almost a year. Hey, before we go further, I have to ask you all something, because this is where my own logic started to really betray me. What's the weirdest rule you've ever seen in a rental agreement? Something that just made you pause and go, huh. Leave it in the comments, because looking back, that message was the biggest, reddest flag I've ever ignored. I spent that day trying to work, but every creak of the cabin, every settling log, made me jump. I became a prisoner of the daylight. As dusk fell, I prepared. I moved a heavy armchair in front of the door. I checked my phone battery. I had a knife from the kitchen block on the nightstand. I felt foolish, but the fear was a cold, solid weight in my stomach. The forest outside my window faded into a wall of impenetrable black. The second night, the knocking changed. It came at 3:17 a.m. again, precise as a clock. But this time, it wasn't on the wall. It was on my front door. Tap, tap, tap. The same polite, patient rhythm. I stopped breathing. My eyes were glued to the door, half expecting the knob to turn. It didn't. After a minute, I heard Ida's soft, shuffling sound on the gravel path, moving away. Towards cabin 7. I spent hours peeking through the blinds, seeing nothing but darkness. The next morning, I found something. On my doorstep was a small, smooth river stone, wet as if with dew. Placed neatly on top of it was a single, long pine needle. It looked deliberate, arranged, a gift or a marker. That was the moment my professional curiosity overrode my terror. I was an archivist. I documented things. I needed to understand. I took my phone, set it to record video, and walked the path to cabin 7. The black door was unnervingly pristine. No keyhole, no knob, just a smooth, dark surface. The single window was curtained from the inside with what looked like thick, black fabric. I raised my hand, my knuckle an inch from the wood, and then I heard it. A sound from inside. Not a knock, a whisper. It was too faint to make out words, but it had a cadence, a repetitive, pleading rhythm. And underneath it, a sound like pages of a book being slowly, carefully turned. My blood turned to ice. I ran back to my cabin. The feeling of being watched, a physical pressure between my shoulder blades. That afternoon, in a desperate bid for normalcy, I decided to build a fire in the little pit outside my cabin. As I gathered kindling near the tree line, my foot caught on something buried in the moss. I knelt and brushed away the damp earth and needles. It was a smartphone, an older model, the screen cracked and dark. I pressed the power button. Nothing. Dead. I took it inside, a strange trophy from this haunted place. On a whim, I plugged it into my charger. After a few minutes, it flickered to life. It was password protected, but the notifications on the lock screen were visible. Dozens of missed calls, texts that read, "Where are you?" and "Please call me, we're worried." And the date on the lock screen, October 17th, 8 months ago. The same time the guestbook entry stopped. The phone buzzed in my hand, making me yelp. A new notification appeared. It was an email. The preview read, "Airman reservation confirmation for Carl R. Cabin 7, Pinecrest Retreat." Dates, October 18th to the screen went black again, the battery icon flashing empty before it died completely. Carl, the host, the last person to rent Cabin 7. My mind, trained to connect fragments of information, began weaving a terrible tapestry. The warning message that felt off, the full voicemail, the blank guestbook, the host who was also a guest, who never left. Night fell for the third time. I was a raw nerve. I had pushed the armchair back against the door, placed the river stone and pine needle on the table, as if studying them could reveal a secret. The silence was worse than the knocking. It was a listening silence. At 3:17 a.m., the world exploded. The knocking wasn't polite. It was a thunderous, frantic banging on my door, so violent the whole cabin shook. The heavy armchair screeched back an inch with each impact. I screamed, scrambling back into the corner of the bedroom, the knife clutched uselessly in my hand. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. The ensuing quiet was deafening, ringing. I heard the shuffling steps on the gravel again, slow, dragging. But they didn't go towards Cabin 7. They stopped right outside my window. I saw a shape blot out the faint starlight through the blinds. A dark, humanoid silhouette. It stood there, motionless. Then, a new sound began. Not a knock, a scratch. Long, slow, deliberate drags of something sharp against the window pane. Screech, screech, screech. It was writing. My breath fogged in the cold air as I trembled, paralyzed. After an eternity, the scratching stopped. The silhouette lingered for one more horrible moment, then melted away into the night. I don't know how long I sat there. The first gray light of dawn was creeping in before I found the courage to move. My legs were numb, my throat raw from held-in screams. I forced myself to go to the window. Etched into the outside of the glass, in deep, frantic grooves, were 2 words. Help me. That was it. I was done. I threw my things into my suitcase, my hands shaking so badly I could barely zip it. I didn't care about the project, the deposit, anything. I just had to get to my car, drive, and never look back. The morning was foggy. The path to the parking area, a tunnel of gray mist. The silence was absolute, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I reached my car, fumbled the key and threw my suitcase in the back. As I slammed the door and turned to get into the driver's seat, I saw it. On the passenger seat, clearly visible through the window, lay a small, neat pile, a smooth river stone, a single, long pine needle, and on top, a faded Polaroid photograph I had never seen before. It was a picture of Cabin 7's black door, taken from the outside, and scratched into the bottom border in thin, frantic handwriting was the same message: help me. I never got in that car. I left everything me luggage, my laptop, my key set. I ran down that mountain road until a park ranger found me, hysterical and bleeding from my bare feet, hours later. They said the Pinecrest retreat had been shut down by the county over a year ago due to permit issues. The owner, Carl, had vanished. The cabins had been empty and locked for months. They found my car in the lot, my belongings still inside. They found no black door on Cabin 7. All the doors were the same weathered brown. They found no scratches on my window, no guest book with ominous entries, no phone. They told me it was stress, isolation, an overactive imagination fueled by the wildness of the place. They were kind, concerned. They gave me a ride to a motel in town. I am writing this from there now. I am supposed to fly home tomorrow. But a few minutes ago, as I was plugging in my own phone to charge, a notification popped up. It's from the Airbnb app. It's a direct message. It's from Carl. It reads, "We're so glad you enjoyed your stay in Cabin 4. Your review means everything to us. We've taken the liberty of auto-confirming your next reservation. We look forward to hosting you again in Cabin 7 next month. The key will be under the stone. Thank you for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of something being deeply wrong, then you understand why I am sharing this. Please, if you're ever somewhere that doesn't feel right, trust that instinct. Don't be like me. Don't ignore the signs. If you enjoyed this tale of digital echoes and lonely places, please give this video a like. It helps more than you know. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories that explore the shadows just outside the frame. And in the comments, tell me, what would you have done when you got that first message? Would you have stayed? Story 4. The night I learned about the hush. I shouldn't have turned down that road, but the GPS said it was the only way to get home. My name is Dev, and I am a rideshare driver. I've driven every inch of this city, or so I thought, until that Tuesday night when the app sent me a pickup request from the old, abandoned Fairview Heights apartment building. The fare was triple the usual rate, and a little voice in the back of my head, one that usually tells me to check my oil, whispered that this was a bad idea. But rent was due, and triple is triple. The normal part was just another shift. The leather of my steering wheel was cool under my palms, the familiar hum of the city a constant soundtrack. My phone was mounted, the rideshare app glowing softly. The first unsettling detail was the request itself. It came from a user named Hush, with a default gray silhouette for a picture. The pickup pin was dropped right in the middle of the Fairview Heights lot, a place condemned for a decade. The second was the destination, a remote, lakeside airbnb listed as the Stillwater Retreat, a 45-minute drive into the deep woods north of the city. The third was the message that popped up immediately after I accepted. Please do not speak. Radio off. I will tip in cash. Weird, but not the weirdest request I've got. Some people are just particular. The Fairview Heights building loomed against the skyline, a skeletal silhouette of broken windows and graffiti. I pulled into the cracked parking lot, the headlights cutting through the thick darkness. No one was there. I put the car in park, my fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on the wheel. I was about to cancel when the back passenger door opened silently, and a figure slid in. I caught a glimpse in the rear view, a woman, face pale, and partially obscured by a dark hoodie headbowed. She placed a single, folded $100 bill on the center console. I nodded, swallowed my standard hi, how's your night, and pulled back onto the road. The drive started in silence. The only sounds were the tires on asphalt and the soft rush of the wind. We left the city lights behind, the world shrinking to the tunnel of my headlights on the 2-lane highway. The trees pressed in, tall and black. My passenger never moved. I checked the mirror compulsively. Her head remained down, hands folded in her lap. There was a smell, faint at first, like damp earth and old paper. It grew stronger the farther we drove. About 20 minutes in, the GPS instructed me to turn onto a narrow, unmarked service road. Road was generous. It was a rutted track of dirt and gravel, barely wide enough for my sedan. Branches scraped against the windows like bony fingers. The app still showed the destination ahead, but my cell signal dropped to 1 bar, then vanished. The car's clock flickered, the digital numbers stuttering between 2:17 a.m. and 3:02 a.m. A cold dread, solid and heavy, began to settle in my stomach. So, for a moment, let me ask you guys something, because I've thought about it a lot since that night. What's your biggest fear when you're alone in the dark? Is it a sound, a shape, or is it just the silence itself? For me, it used to be the idea of someone being in the backseat. That night, it became the certainty that the person in my backseat wasn't a person at all. We finally emerged into a small clearing. At its center was a modern, angular lakeside cabin airbnb. A single motion sensor light flicked on, casting a harsh white glare over a wooden deck. The lake behind it was a sheet of black glass. I put the car in park, the engine idling. The silence was absolute. I waited for her to get out. She didn't move. I cleared my throat, the sound obscenely loud. Mom, we're here. Slowly, very slowly, her head lifted. I saw her eyes in the mirror. They were wide, terrified, and brimming with tears. Her mouth was moving, shaping soundless words. Then, she pressed a single finger to her lips in a desperate, universal gesture for silence. SHHH. She pointed a trembling finger past me, toward the cabin's large, dark picture window. I turned. Standing in the window, silhouetted against the faint glow of what must have been a hallway light inside, was a figure. It was tall, impossibly thin, and utterly still. It wasn't looking out at the car. Its head was cocked to the side, as if listening. My blood turned to ice. The woman in my backseat shoved another $100 bill over my shoulder and mouthed one word: go. I didn't need telling twice. I threw the car into reverse, spun it around on the gravel, and sped back down the forest track. My heart was a jackhammer against my ribs. I kept checking the mirror. The back seat was empty. She was just gone. The money, 2 crisp bills, was still on the console. The smell of damp earth was fading. I hit the main road, my knuckles white on the wheel, and didn't stop driving until I saw the warm, beautiful glow of a 24-hour gas station. I sat in that well-lit parking lot for an hour, shaking, drinking terrible coffee, and trying to logic it all away. A prank, an ARG, a weird performance art piece. The woman was scared of the person in the cabin, that's all. Shed jumped out when I wasn't looking. The figure was just a shadow, a trick of the light. The money was real. I had $200 I didn't have before. By the time the sun began to tinge the sky gray, it almost convinced myself. Almost. I drove home, exhausted, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. The false safety lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th night, I was driving again. A routine trip, a couple from a downtown bar to a suburb. As I dropped them off, my rideshare app pinged. A new request from Hush. The pickup was at my current location. The destination was my home address. My breath froze in my lungs. I declined the request. My phone buzzed instantly with another. And another. Decline, buzz, decline, buzz. I fumbled to turn the app off to shut my phone down. The screen glitched, the map distorting, and a line of text appeared in the notification bar, not from the app, but as if etched into the phone's own display. You broke the hush. I drove home in a blind panic, every shadow a stretching limb, every street lamp a watching eye. My apartment building felt safe, familiar. I locked the door, bolted it, shoved a chair under the knob. I poured a drink, my hands trembling so badly the liquid sloshed over the rim. It was over. I was home. It was a sick hack, a glitch. I'd call the company in the morning. That's when the noises started, not from the door, from inside the apartment. A soft, shuffling step from the dark hallway. A faint, wet sound of inhalation, like someone sniffing the air. The smell returned, stronger know-it soil decay, and beneath it, something sweetly metallic. I sat rigid on my couch, the only light from my muted TV casting jumping blue shadows. The shuffling came from just behind the kitchen wall. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It was a listening silence. I mustered every ounce of courage, grabbed a heavy flashlight, and crept toward the hallway. My bedroom door was ajar. I always close it. I nudged it open with my foot, flashlight beam sweeping across the bed, the dresser, the closet. Empty. I let out a shuddering breath, a trick of the mind. I turned to leave, and the beam caught the full-length mirror on the back of the door. Reflected in it, crouched in the far corner of the room behind me, where the beam hadn't reached, was the thin figure from the cabin window. It was folded into itself, limbs bent at unnatural angles, its head that same tilted pose. Its face was a blur of shadows, but I felt its attention lock onto me in the mirror's reflection. It wasn't in the room with me. It was in the reflection. And in the reflection, it was now slowly uncurling, beginning to crawl toward me, not across the carpet, but through the mirrored surface, its movements a series of jerky, insectal clicks. I screamed and spun around, swinging the flashlight at empty air. The real corner was empty, but in the periphery of my vision, in the dark TV screen, in the glass of a picture frame, I saw its movement. It was in the reflections. It traveled through them. The hush wasn't a passenger. It was the rule. The woman in my car wasn't running from someone in the cabin. She was running from the thing that lived in the silence, the thing that listened for a sound to follow, the thing that was now here because I had spoken in its presence. I had broken the hush, and now it was attached to me, hunting through the shiny surfaces of my world. I have covered every mirror, every window, every screen with blankets and tape. I live in the dark, moving by touch. I can hear it sometimes, a faint scraping against the other side of the covered bathroom mirror. I write this on my phone with the brightness all the way down. I don't know how it gets in. Maybe when I blink. Maybe when I forget and glance at a spoon, or a watch face, or a drop of water. It's patient. It's always listening. So I stay quiet. I don't speak. I don't make a sound. But I have to tell you this story. I have to warn someone. So I am whispering. It's learning to whisper back. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you're not alone. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. It helps more than you know. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into the terrifying and unexplained. And in the comments below, let me know. What would you do if you saw something in a reflection that wasn't in the room? Stay safe out there, and remember sometimes, the quiet is the most dangerous thing of all. Story 5. Why I never drive the old highway. I'm going to tell you about the night I learned that some shortcuts are a one-way trip. My name is Miguel, and I used to be a road warrior, the kind of guy who laughed at the idea of being scared of a little dark asphalt. That changed on a Tuesday in late October, when my GPS died on State Route 47. It was supposed to be a simple 4-hour drive from my cousin's wedding back to my apartment in the city. I was tired. My suit jacket was crumpled in the passenger seat, and a light, cold rain had started to mist the windshield. My phone, plugged into the car charger, was at a precarious 12. That was my first mistackarelliing on it completely. The second was ignoring the faded, bullet-riddled sign that read route 47 not maintained after dark. As I took the turn off, my dying app insisted was faster. The app flickered and died completely a mile later, the screen going black and refusing to reboot. The car's clock read 10:17 p.m. The old highway was a ribbon of cracked asphalt unfurling through a tunnel of dense, ancient pines. My headlights carved out a feeble pocket of the world, the beams catching the swirling mist and the eyes of what I hoped were just deer, glittering briefly in the darkness before vanishing. There were no reflectors, no mile markers, no signs of life except the oppressive weight of the forest pressing in from both sides. The only sound was the rhythmic thump of my tires over the seams in the old road and the whisper of the rain. I turned on the radio, seeking any human voice, but all I got was static, a hissing white noise that felt somehow attentive. I switched it off. The silence that followed was worse. You know that feeling when you're alone in a big, dark house and you hear a creak? You tell yourself it's just the settling of old wood. That's what I did. The road was just lonely. The rain was just rain. My mind was just tired. I cranked up the heat and focused on the yellow line, which was fading in and out like a ghostly scar. Then I saw the hitchhiker, a figure standing perfectly still under a lone, broken streetlight about 100 yards ahead. My headlights washed over them as I approached. A man in a dark, sodden coat, his face pale and downturned, one arm held out with a thumb extended. A totally normal, if miserably timed, sight. Except for his stance. He wasn't shifting his weight, wasn't bouncing on his heels against the cold. He was statue still. Every cell in my body, every primal instinct inherited from ancestors who feared things in the dark, screamed at me not to stop. My foot hovered over the brake for a split second before pressing harder on the accelerator. As I shot past, my eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The figure was still there under the light, but now his head was turned, watching me go. I couldn't see his face, just that pale, featureless oval aimed directly at my retreating car. A cold trickle, unrelated to the rain, traced a path down my spine. Okay, viewers, quick question for you. While Miguel tries to calm his racing heart, what's your personal rule for driving at night? Do you avoid certain roads? Never pick up hitchhikers? Let me know in the comments, because honestly, I'd love to hear what precautions you take. For me, it was always keep the tank above half. But back to the story. I drove faster, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The road began to curve, a long, sweeping bend that seemed to go on forever. The trees here were even thicker, their branches clawing at the edges of my light. That's when I saw it again. The same hitchhiker, standing under another solitary, flickering streetlight, in the same exact posture. Same dark coat same pale, downturned face. It was impossible. I hadn't passed any turnoffs, hadn't seen any other cars. There was no way he could have gotten ahead of me. A jolt of pure electric fear shot through me. I stomped on the gas, the engine roaring in the silent night. As I passed him, I couldn't help but look. This time, his head was already turned. His face was still a blur, but I saw his arm. It wasn't just extended for a ride. His index finger was pointing down the road in the direction I was going. The false safety came about 20 minutes later. The trees finally began to thin, and I saw the warm, beautiful glow of gas station lights in the distance. A lonely, run-down place, but it was a beacon of modern, mundane reality. I pulled in, the tires crunching on gravel, and almost wept with relief. An old man behind the counter looked up from a small TV as I entered, the bell jingling. I bought a stale coffee, a charger, and a map. "Quiet night," I said, my voice sounding too loud. "Always is on the 47, he grunted, not looking away from his show. "Yeah, saw a hitchhiker back there. Weird guy, just standing in the rain." The old man's eyes slowly slid from the TV to me. They were milky with cataracts. Ain't no hitchhikers on the 47. Not for 30 years, since the old Miller boy vanished. They say he still tries to get home, but he don't know the way no more. He just points. He turned back to the TV, the conversation clearly over. The coffee turned to acid in my stomach. The map shook in my hands. It showed Route 47, but it ended in a dotted line about 10 miles ahead, with the legend abandoned bridge out. The bridge had been condemned 3 decades ago. The shortcut my GPS had sent me on didn't exist anymore. I had been driving on a ghost road. I ran back to my car, fumbling with the keys. My phone, now on the charger, blinked to life. A flood of missed notifications popped up, and one new text message from an unknown number. It was a photo, a blurry, dark photo taken through a rain-spattered window. It was my car, from behind, taken moments ago as I pulled into the gas station. The text beneath it read, "You shouldn't have stopped." I threw the car into drive and peeled out, gravel spraying. I had to go back the way I came. There was no other choice. The rain was now a downpour, a solid wall of water my wipers fought hopelessly against. The tunnel of trees welcomed me back, darker and hungrier than before. I was driving slower now, terrified of missing a turn, my eyes darting between the disintegrating road and the map on the passenger seat. The streetlights were fewer, most of them dark. And then my headlights died. Not the electrical system, dashboard lights still glowed. Just the headlights. They snuffed out as if a hand had closed over them. I was plunged into near-total darkness, guided only by the weak glow of my parking lights, illuminating maybe 5 feet of wet asphalt in front of me. I was crawling blind. That's when I heard the first tap. A single, sharp tap on the passenger side window. I jerked my head. Nothing but blackness. Then a tap on the rear window. Then the driver's side. following me, keeping pace with the car. I slammed my fists on the steering wheel, screaming at the lights to come on. The tapping became a scraping, a long, slow drag of something sharp against the metal of the roof. The climax broke with a sudden, violent crack of thunder. In the stark, blue-white flash of lightning, the world outside was frozen in a snapshot. He was there, in the middle of the road, 20 feet ahead, not standing still. He was running, sprinting on all fours like a beast, his back arched, his coat flapping like ragged wings. His face was upturned now, and in that split second of illumination, I saw it. It wasn't a face. It was a smooth, blank mannequin's head, pale and shiny with rain. But it was turned toward me, and it saw me. And his finger, that same long index finger, was pointed right at my windshield. I screamed and swerved, tires sliding on the wet road. The car left the asphalt, slammed into a ditch with a jarring crunch of metal and glass, and everything went sideways, then black. I woke up to the sound of a state trooper knocking on my shattered window. It was dawn, a gray, sickly light filtering through the trees. I was in a ditch, yes, but I was on the modern, paved Route 9, a busy highway. My car was wrecked, but I was alive. The trooper said I was lucky, that I must have dozed off and missed the turn. They found my phone shattered in the passenger footwell. No record of a text with a photo. The gas station attendant, when they checked, was a young woman who said the old man I described hadn't worked there in years. He'd died of a stroke the previous winter. There was no abandoned Route 47 on any of their maps. They chalked it up to concussion and shock. I told them I must have been dreaming. I almost believed it myself. They dropped me at a motel to wait for a tow. As I sat on the stiff bed, the local news playing softly on the TV, a story came on. A hiker had found something in the woods near the old, collapsed bridge on the abandoned Route 47 alignment. A single, waterlogged leather shoe. And near it, a set of strange, deep gouges in the mud, leading away from the riverbank and into the deep woods. The reporter said the gouges looked almost like something had been dragged. But then the camera zoomed in on one particular mark in the soft earth. It wasn't a drag mark at all. It was perfectly clear, pressed deep into the mud. It was the imprint of a single pointing finger. I changed my name and moved to a city with excellent public transit. I don't drive at night anymore. I can't. Because sometimes, when I am walking home late under the streetlights, I'll see a figure out of the corner of my eye, standing too still under a lamp post. And I'll quicken my pace, my blood running cold, because I know that roads aren't the only things that can be haunted. Sometimes, the thing that haunts them decides to follow you home, and I always check my phone, dreading the moment an unknown number sends a blurry photo of my own back, with a simple, terrifying message. So far, it hasn't come, but the map is always in my pocket, and the old highway is always waiting, just one wrong turn away. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you are not alone. The unknown is the oldest fear we have. If you enjoyed this journey into the dark, please show your support by giving this video a thumbs up. It helps more than you know. And if you are not already part of our community of night travelers and story survivors, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a tale. I want to hear from you. What did you think was waiting for Miguel on that road? And what's the one road or place you'd never, ever visit after dark? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Until next time, remember, some shortcuts aren't worth the price. Drive safe. Thank you for spending part of your night with us. If you enjoyed the story, we'd appreciate a comment, a like, and a subscription to the channel. And please share this video with your friends who enjoy calm horror and rain sounds. Rest well and good night.